Sophia's raw story will make you question the boundaries of honesty and temptation. As a young woman from Jordan, Sophia comes to America to be a nanny for the Mitchell family, hoping to build an independent life. What she never anticipated was how her kindness and love for the family would pull her into a dangerous web of desire. Her relationship with Michael, the husband, gradually crosses professional boundaries as deep, unspoken feelings bubble to the surface. Both know they're making a mistake, but neither can stop. No matter how strong your willpower is, there are temptations you can't fight. And what will happen when everything spirals out of control? This story will keep you glued to the screen. Before continuing the story, tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far this video has come. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so I can send you exciting stories like this every day. On a warm summer morning in a quiet suburb of Virginia, Sophia, 33 years old, stood for the first time in front of a charming red brick house. The air was thick with humidity, and the heat seemed to wrap itself around her. She adjusted her scarf on her shoulder and took a deep breath. This was her first day at her new job, as a nanny for the Mitchell family. Far from her homeland of Jordan, Sophia never imagined she'd one day leave her family behind, leave the dusty streets of Amman, and move to a foreign country like America. But life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it? She needed the money not just to survive, but to prove to her parents and siblings that she could stand on her own, that she could succeed even without conforming to the traditional expectations society placed on women. The door opened, and she was greeted by Rachel Mitchell, a woman who radiated perfection. Her blonde hair was neatly swept into a bun, her crisp white blouse was impeccably tailored, and her elegant high heels clicked against the tiled floor, exuding confidence and authority. She smiled warmly, her expression friendly yet deliberate, as though each word she spoke carried intentional meaning. "Sophia, welcome to the Mitchell family," Rachel said, her voice slow and clear in that distinct, deliberate American way. Beside her stood Michael Mitchell, her husband, a tall man with a kind and approachable demeanor. His sandy brown hair curled slightly at the ends, and the laugh lines around his eyes told stories of joy rather than stress. He didn't say much, simply nodding politely as he handed Sophia a cup of tea. Their two children, Lily and Jack, were bundles of energy, at 5 and 3 years old respectively. Lily's bright blue eyes sparkled with curiosity as she fired off endless innocent questions, while Jack clung to his mother like her little shadow. Sophia felt a twinge of nervousness. She had never worked as a nanny before, but Rachel quickly reassured her. "Taking care of 5 younger siblings at home sounds like plenty of experience," she said, her tone gentle yet firm, as she handed Sophia a thick binder filled with rules, meal plans, schedules, and even instructions on how to fold towels. It was clear she was a perfectionist. The first few weeks passed smoothly. Sophia woke up at 6 a.m. every day to prepare breakfast, pack Lily's lunch for school, and entertain Jack with stories and games until his nap time. The house began to feel familiar, and she started to feel like she belonged there. In the evenings, she retreated to her small basement room, exhausted but content, knowing she was doing her job well. It seemed like things would remain peaceful forever, but fate has a way of shaking things up when we least expect it. Please comment number 1 so that I can know that you liked the video and subscribe to our channel. Your support is a great inspiration and encouragement for us. Thank you very much. One afternoon, as she crouched on the kitchen floor wiping up the juice Jack had spilled, Sophia suddenly felt someone's gaze on her. Looking up, she saw Michael leaning against the kitchen counter, his expression thoughtful yet warm. "You're amazing with the kids." His tone sincere, Sophia froze for a moment, startled. "Oh, thank you. Mr. Mitchell," she replied, unsure how to address him. "Please call me Michael," he said with a smile that made his face seem even more approachable. She nodded, feeling her cheeks grow warm, not because of the compliment itself, but because of the way he said it, as if the words truly mattered. Back home, men rarely spoke to women in such a kind and genuine tone, unless there was an ulterior motive. But Michael seemed different. Sophia shook off the strange feeling and returned to her work. Still, from that day on, she found herself noticing Michael more often, how he always asked if she'd eaten lunch, how he offered to help carry heavy bags after her trips to the grocery store, or how he lingered in the kitchen while she cooked. Meanwhile, Rachel's absence became more frequent. Her high-powered job demanded long business trips, leaving Michael and Sophia to manage the children together. Sophia kept reminding herself that this was just work, that she needed to maintain a professional distance. But deep down, she knew things weren't so simple. What Sophia didn't realize then was that this was only the beginning. Do you feel curious about Sophia's story? Comment 1 if you want to know what happens next. And don't forget to hit like to show your support. Part 2, the first signs. Life in the Mitchell household quickly settled into a steady rhythm. Mornings began with me waking Lily and Jack, preparing breakfast for the family, and seeing Lily off to her school bus. The rest of the day was spent entertaining Jack, teaching him letters, and telling stories before his nap. In the evenings, I often found myself cleaning the kitchen while Michael read to the kids in the living room. It was a peaceful, predictable life. But beneath the surface, I began to notice small changes. Rachel's presence at home grew increasingly rare. Her job demanded more of her time, with frequent business trips to Chicago or New York becoming the norm. At first, Michael tried to maintain the household routine, but I could see he was struggling. Late at night, after the children were asleep, he often sat quietly on the sofa, sometimes with a glass of wine, his eyes lost in thought. Then there were the evenings he began appearing in the kitchen while I was cleaning. At first, he leaned against the counter asking polite surface-level questions. But over time, these conversations grew longer, deeper. "Do you ever get tired of taking care of kids every day?" Michael asked one evening as I stood at the sink washing dishes. "I'm used to it," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Being the eldest in a family of 6 kids back home, this is nothing new to me. He chuckled softly, his laugh carrying a note of understanding. "You make it look effortless. Honestly, I think you're better at this than Rachel or I could ever be." I smiled faintly, brushing off the comment. "You're being too kind. I'm just doing what needs to be done." But there was something in his words that struck a chord. It wasn't just a passing compliment. It felt genuine, heartfelt. For the first time, I felt truly seen for what I did. Until then, I had always believed my efforts were simply expected, nothing special. Yet Michael made me feel appreciated in a way I hadn't experienced before, a shared moment. One afternoon, while I pushed Lily on the backyard swing, Michael emerged from the house carrying a tray of iced tea. "I thought you might need a break," he said, placing the tray on a nearby table. "Thank you," I replied, trying to maintain a natural demeanor. We sat down on the porch steps, watching Lily and Jack chase each other across the lawn. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow, and the air was filled with the sound of Lily's laughter and the rustling of leaves in the breeze. It was peaceful, almost serene. Out of nowhere, Michael broke the silence. "Do you ever think about what you left behind back home?" I turned to him, surprised by the question. Please pause for 2 seconds. Please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support is a great inspiration and encouragement for us. Thank you very much. "What do you mean? I mean, if you hadn't left Jordan, what would your life look like now?" I paused, reflecting on his words. "I think about it often," I admitted, "but I know why I came here. I wanted to build a better life, not just for myself, but so my family could be proud of me." Michael nodded, his gaze distant, as if lost in his own thoughts. "You've sacrificed so much, coming to a place so far from home. It takes a kind of bravery not many people have." His words struck a nerve. It wasn't just recognition, it was understanding. I had never thought of my decision as a sacrifice, but in that moment I realized he was right. I had given up a part of myself to pursue something bigger. Lingering thoughts. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Michael's words replaying in my mind. He wasn't like any man I had known before. He was attentive, understanding, and seemed to see me in a way I didn't expect. But I knew this was dangerous. He was a husband, a father, and I was the nanny in his home. Whatever I was feeling, no matter how slight, was something I couldn't allow to grow. I closed my eyes, telling myself these were just fleeting thoughts. Tomorrow, I would return to my work, focus on the children, and everything would go back to normal. But deep down, I knew my life was slowly shifting, and not in a way I wanted or was prepared for. Part 3, blurring the boundaries. The days that followed were a delicate balancing act. I tried to maintain distance from Michael, reminding myself that I was here for a job, not to get entangled in the personal struggles of the Mitchell family. But staying detached wasn't as easy as I hoped. Rachel was still busy with her extended business trips, and Michael seemed intent on finding excuses to engage me in conversation. The first rainy night, it was a rainy evening when the first real shift occurred. After putting Lily and Jack to bed, I was tidying up the kitchen, enjoying the rhythmic sound of the rain tapping against the windows. The house was quiet, and for a moment I felt a sense of peace, but that peace was short-lived. Michael walked into the kitchen, sleeves rolled up and a glass of wine in hand. "Need any help?" he asked, his voice calm and genuine. "No, it's okay. I'm almost done," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. But he didn't leave. Instead, he walked over and grabbed a dish towel from the counter. "At least let me dry. I should do something to help, right?" We worked in silence, but the air between us felt charged, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, he broke the silence. "Sophia, do you ever miss home?" he asked softly, his tone laced with curiosity and concern. "Every day," I admitted, focusing on scrubbing the dishes. "But I came here for a reason, to build a life." He nodded, his gaze distant, as if lost in thought. "You've sacrificed more than anyone I know. I don't think I could do what you've done." His words caught me off guard. I had never considered my decision to leave Jordan as a sacrifice. It was simply what I had to do. But the way he said it, the way he looked at me, made me feel valued in a way I hadn't experienced before. "It's not a sacrifice," I said quietly, trying to keep my composure. "It's just a choice." Michael looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You've made me realize that sometimes, even when you make the right choice, you can still feel like you've lost something." I didn't know how to respond. His words were too raw, too personal. But before I could say anything, he added, "Sophia, you're not just a nanny to this family. You've brought a warmth back into this house that we lost a long time ago." Crossing the line. Michael's words haunted me that night. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. It wasn't just gratitude I felt. It was something deeper. Something I knew was wrong but couldn't deny. In the days that followed, Michael's presence in the house became more constant. He claimed it was to spend more time with the kids, but I knew there was more to it. His lingering glances, his thoughtful questions, his attention. All of it made it harder for me to maintain the boundaries I tried to set. One afternoon, as I was folding laundry in the living room, Michael approached me with a small box. "I noticed you've been trying new recipes," he said, placing the box on the coffee table. "I thought this might inspire you." I opened the box to find a set of hardcover cookbooks, each one beautifully bound and new. I looked up at him, speechless. "You don't have to thank me," he said with a small smile. "It's just a way of showing how much I appreciate everything you've done for this family." I managed a faint smile, but inside I felt overwhelmed. This wasn't just a thoughtful gift. It was a sign that Michael saw me as more than just the hired help. He was noticing me in ways that blurred the lines of our professional relationship. The moment everything changed. One quiet evening, as the house lay in stillness, I was wiping down the kitchen counters when Michael walked in. He stood there for a moment, watching me before finally speaking. "Sophia, I need to talk to you," he said, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. I stopped what I was doing and turned to face him. "What is it?" "About us," he said, his tone low and deliberate. I froze. "Michael, there is no us. You're misunderstanding." "No," he interrupted, stepping closer. "I can't stop thinking about you. You're the only person who's made me feel alive again. Rachel and I, we've been broken for a long time, and I can't deny how I feel anymore." My heart raced and I felt my hands tremble. "Michael, you have a family." "I can't." "Sophia," he whispered, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I know this is wrong, but I can't help it." Before I could respond, he leaned in and kissed me. It was soft at first, hesitant, as if testing the waters. Then it deepened, filled with a longing that neither of us could ignore. In that moment, every boundary I had set for myself, every rule I had sworn to follow, seemed to disappear. But as the kiss ended, reality came crashing back. I stepped back, tears welling up in my eyes. "We can't do this, Michael. It's wrong." "I can't." He didn't say anything, just looked at me with a mix of regret and something that felt like longing. In his eyes, I saw the truth. Things between us had irrevocably changed. We had crossed a line neither of us could undo. Nashper, Part 4, Facing Temptation. The kiss changed everything. After that night, I did everything in my power to create distance between Michael and myself. I poured every ounce of energy into my work, caring for Lily and Jack, tidying up the house, and maintaining a routine that gave me the illusion of control. I convinced myself that if I focused hard enough, the growing tension between Michael and me would dissipate. But the truth was, I couldn't escape. Michael wasn't just present in the house. He was invading my thoughts, my dreams. Rachel's absence didn't help. She continued to be away on long business trips, leaving behind a void that Michael and I both tried to fill for the sake of the children. Yet, in the seemingly harmless moments of shared responsibility, we created a space dangerously vulnerable to temptation. That night, the rain drummed steadily against the windows, and the wind howled like a distant cry echoing through the house. I had just placed the last clean towel on the rack when Michael entered the kitchen. He stood there, framed by the soft glow of the overhead light, a glass of red wine in hand, his eyes fixed on me. "Do you ever rest?" he asked, his voice low and husky. "I'm used to it," I replied, attempting a casual tone, though my hands trembled slightly as I placed the towel on the counter. Michael set his glass down on the marble counter and stepped closer, his movements slow and deliberate. My heart pounded as I realized the space between us was shrinking. When he was just a few steps away, our eyes met. His gaze was no longer that of a polite employer. It was the look of a man who could no longer hold back. "Sophia," he murmured, his voice almost a whisper, "I can't stop thinking about you." I took a step back, only to feel the cold surface of the counter against my back. "Michael, what are you doing?" I managed, my voice trembling. "You know what I'm doing," he said, his tone steady, his eyes unwavering. "You feel it too." "I can't," I whispered, barely able to find my voice. "You have a family. I can't do this." But before I could say more, he reached out and gently cupped my face in his hand. His touch was warm and tender, and it froze me in place. I couldn't move. My heart raced as he leaned closer. When his lips met mine, every thought, every belief I had clung to seemed to melt away. The kiss was gentle at first, but it deepened with a passion that spoke volumes, a longing neither of us had dared to admit. In that moment, I surrendered. I forgot about Rachel, about my faith, about the rules I had lived by for so long. There was only Michael losing control. Michael pulled me closer, his arms wrapping around my waist as if he were afraid to let go. The kitchen, the house, the storm outside, all of it faded into the background. His hands traveled slowly, his fingers brushing over the of my dress, sending shivers down my spine. "Sophia," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Don't say anything," he murmured against my neck. "I know this is wrong, but I can't stop." His hand slid up to my cheek, his thumb tracing the edge of my jaw as he looked into my eyes. There was a question in his gaze, a silent plea for permission. I couldn't speak, couldn't think. I nodded almost imperceptibly, and that was all he needed. His lips found mine again, and this time the kiss was desperate, full of all the emotions we had suppressed. He lifted me effortlessly, and I let him. Without a word, he carried me out of the kitchen, down the dimly lit hallway and up the stairs. I knew where this was heading, knew we were crossing a line we could never undo, but I couldn't bring myself to stop him. Shh, the moment we couldn't take back. In his bedroom, the golden glow of the bedside lamp cast a soft light over everything, making the space feel both intimate and forbidden. He set me gently on the edge of the bed, sitting beside me as he carefully removed my scarf, his fingers grazing my skin. His eyes roamed over me, filled with a mixture of admiration and desire. "You're beautiful," he said softly, his voice trembling slightly. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Instead, I let him touch me, his hands exploring cautiously, as though afraid I might disappear. His lips trailed from my neck to my shoulder, each kiss igniting a fire inside me I hadn't known was there. His hands moved with deliberate slowness, peeling away layers of fabric, and I found myself leaning into him, allowing him to pull me closer. I kissed him back, letting go of the guilt, the fear, the voice in my head screaming that this was wrong. In that moment, I was no longer Sophia the nanny. I was a woman being cherished, desired, and it was intoxicating. We lost ourselves in each other that night, giving in to a passion that had been building for weeks. It was raw, consuming, and heartbreaking all at once. A moment of pleasure overshadowed by the weight of knowing it could never be right. The morning after, the next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains, and the weight of what had happened hit me like a wave. I woke in my own room, the events of the night before replaying in my mind like a broken record. Shame, regret, and longing mixed together in a cocktail of emotions I couldn't escape. When I entered the kitchen to prepare breakfast for Lily and Jack, Michael was already there, pouring himself a cup of coffee. He glanced at me, his expression unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, a quiet acknowledgement of what had passed between us. "Good morning," he said, his voice soft, almost hesitant. "Good morning," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. I avoided his gaze, but no matter how much I tried to act normal, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed. The inner battle, in the days that followed, I wrestled with my conscience. Who had I become? I'd always taken pride in my discipline, my faith, my ability to resist temptation. But now I felt like a traitor, not just to Rachel, but to myself. Michael, however, didn't seem ready to stop. He found every excuse to be near me, to create moments for us to be alone. Despite knowing how destructive this was, I couldn't fully resist. His presence, his kindness, his unwavering attention, they had become the highlight of my days. But I knew I couldn't live in this limbo forever. I had to make a choice, no matter how painful it might be. Part 5. Consequences and hard choices. Time passed, but each day in the Mitchell household became a battle of conscience for me. After that night, when we crossed the line, I wasn't the same. Even though Michael and I tried to keep our actions a secret, the tension, the stolen glances, and the unspoken closeness between us began to feel impossible to conceal. I knew I was walking a dangerous path, yet I lacked the courage to stop. Signs of discovery. Rachel returned from an unusually long business trip. From the moment she walked through the door, she sensed that something was off. Perhaps it was the awkwardness in the way Michael and I spoke in front of her, or maybe it was simply her intuition as a wife and mother. "Sophia, I can't thank you enough for taking such good care of the kids while I've been away," Rachel said one evening as we sat in the kitchen. Her eyes lingered on me, sharp and scrutinizing. "I don't know what we'd do without you." Her words hit me like a punch to the chest. I felt like a betrayer sitting face to face with the very person I had wronged. I forced a weak smile and tried to remain composed, but Rachel's gaze remained steady, as though she were searching for something hidden beneath the surface. Unspoken jealousy. One afternoon, as Michael and I played with Lily and Jack in the backyard, I noticed Rachel standing at the window watching us. Her expression was unreadable, but her posture was stiff, her gaze cold and calculating. Michael, oblivious to her presence, continued laughing and chasing the kids, but I felt the weight of Rachel's eyes on me. That night, tension filled the house as Rachel and Michael argued behind closed doors. Though their words were muffled, it was clear she was questioning the changes in Michael's behavior. I sat in my room, drowning in guilt. I had allowed myself to fall too deeply into something that never should have begun, and now everyone was paying the price. The confrontation. One day, while Rachel took the kids out for an afternoon outing, Michael found me in the kitchen. His face was drawn, his eyes shadowed with turmoil. "Sophia, we can't keep doing this," he said, his voice trembling. "I can't keep hurting Rachel, but I also can't stop thinking about you." "Michael, don't you see?" I replied, my voice quivering. "We were wrong from the start. I can't live with this guilt anymore." "I love you, Sophia," he said, his voice breaking. "You've brought life back into this house, into me. I've never felt so understood." I froze, my heart aching. I loved him too, but that love had only brought pain and destruction. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay strong. "Michael, I love you too. I got to eat was I admitted, tears streaming down my face. "But we can't keep doing this. I can't be the reason your family falls apart, and I can't destroy myself in the process." The decision to leave. That night, I made the hardest decision of my life. I knew I couldn't stay. Remaining in the Mitchell household would only make everything worse, for me and for them. 2 weeks later, I handed in my resignation. Rachel was stunned, her eyes filled with concern. "Sophia, is everything okay? Did we do something wrong?" she asked, setting her coffee cup on the counter. "No, it's not that," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just feel it's time for me to move on, to find something new for myself." Rachel hugged me tightly, her voice breaking. "You've been such an important part of this family, Sophia. We'll miss you so much." When I told Michael, he said nothing at first. He simply nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resignation. "I understand," he said quietly, "but I'll never forget you." On the day I left, Lily and Jack clung to me, their tearful goodbyes breaking my heart. I hugged them tightly, whispering, "I'll always love you. You'll always be in my heart." Rachel stood at the door, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Michael stood farther back, his gaze following my every move. As the taxi pulled away, I glanced back at the house one last time. It had been a place where I learned so much about love, mistakes, and the strength it took to walk away. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew I had to start over. The journey to rediscovery. In my small, new apartment, I spent hours reflecting. I prayed, seeking forgiveness from myself and from my faith. Though my heart still felt hollow, I knew this was the only path toward healing. My story doesn't have a happy ending, but it is the truth. Sometimes love isn't enough, and love isn't always enough to make things right. I've been on a journey full of hardship, where intense emotions and unavoidable temptations shook the foundations of the values I had built my life on. I loved and I gave everything I had. But when that love was not enough to protect my personal values, when it caused me to lose myself, I realized that sometimes love is just a fleeting feeling, and the truth is something that can last much longer. There were times when I wondered if I was weak for deciding to walk away from a family I had once considered my own. Even though my love for them was genuine, I could not bear the feeling of guilt when I looked into the eyes of those I loved, yet could no longer continue down that path. There were times when I questioned whether I was wrong for stopping, for giving up on something I thought was right. But looking back, I realized that decision wasn't weakness, it was strength. Sometimes love isn't enough to keep us in situations that are wrong. I loved and I sacrificed, but I also learned that no matter how much you love someone, you cannot lose yourself for them. My story stands as a testimony to the truth that no matter how powerful love is, sometimes we have to love ourselves more. Loving yourself means knowing when to stop, when to let go, and protect the things that matter most to you. I learned that nothing is more precious than your integrity. And if I had to sacrifice love to protect it, then that was a sacrifice worth making. I know that not everyone will understand my decision, and there will be those who think I am weak, someone unwilling to face challenges. But I had to learn to live with myself, to face my mistakes and not let temptations cause me to lose who I was. No one can live my life for me, and I can't live anyone else's. That's why I chose the difficult path. But I truly believe it was the right one. Love doesn't always have a happy ending like we hope, and sometimes we have to face painful decisions, difficult choices. But more than that, we need to love ourselves enough to protect who we are, to stop letting temptations or mistakes repeat. And in all of this, the lesson I learned is that sometimes the most important thing is not to seek a perfect love, but to hold on to the values you believe in and protect what makes you who you are. Although my story doesn't have a perfect ending, it is a story of strength, growth, and the lesson of staying true to one's principles. It's the story of someone who loved and sacrificed, but ultimately learned that to live a full life, you must know when to let go and love yourself enough to protect your conscience and your integrity. Because in the end, walking away isn't weakness, it's strength. It's the hardest choice, but also the right one. Sophia's story is not just about love, temptation, or mistakes she made. It is a profound lesson about inner strength and the importance of staying true to your personal values, no matter the challenges life throws at you. Sophia faced an incredibly complex situation where her heart and mind conflicted with each other at every turn. She could not find the right path between the overwhelming emotions she felt and the rational call to stop. But through all the suffering and struggles, Sophia learned a valuable lesson. Sacrificing her personal values for fleeting emotions was never worth it. Even though she had to walk away from a family she once considered home, Sophia found the strength to walk her own path, stand up for herself, and protect her conscience. She didn't let temptations or mistakes steer her life in the wrong direction. Life is not always easy, and sometimes difficult choices are necessary to preserve your integrity. She realized that while love is a beautiful thing, when that love causes you to lose yourself and your morals, it is no longer love. Sophia's story is a clear testament that in life, while it is easy to be swept away by emotions and temporary temptations, the most important thing is to always stay true to your values. There is nothing more important than knowing when to stop, when to let go, to prevent yourself and others from harm. We often think of love as everything, but sometimes love needs to be viewed from a different perspective, so we don't fall into mistakes that can't be undone. Sophia may not have had a fairy tale ending, but she found the strength in letting go of the wrong things, to rediscover herself and live a life truly worth living. This is the greatest lesson we can take from her story. When you face difficult decisions in life, remember that standing firm in your values will help you overcome any challenge. If this story has touched your heart, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel so you never miss any of our emotional stories filled with valuable life lessons. Share this story with your friends and family so we can all learn, grow, and live authentically together. Also, don't forget to turn on notifications to stay updated on our latest videos. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to sharing many more meaningful stories with you in the near future.